So let's do this. I want to take a look at a couple of other belief systems, fantasy, whatever. I started talking about that, the dojo fantasy logic, that kind of thing, right? Or what we affectionately call, and I didn't make this up. This went all the way back. Shoshi Malmstrom, Shoshi Hayes. We had this term for misguided beliefs in the dojo, right? Or picking up certain habits or certain beliefs or certain training methods that would sneak in because, well, they worked in a dojo. And we confuse that with the real world. And I say we, I'll include myself in there for the different things, not always the same, because I came to the martial arts honestly, and I don't mean honestly because I like them. I mean honestly because I had a very violent childhood, inside the house and outside. But the term that we used was Dojo Syndrome. And what that is, we named it this as this like disease or affliction that someone catches either because of the association with the group and it's already going on, or because nobody inoculated them. Nobody gave them the shot to make sure that didn't happen. And luckily, I've had teachers, especially within this art, that the inoculations, the shots, the boosters were plentiful. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple of these things, right? Let's explore some delusions, right? So let's start with sport fighters, right? We'll just piss people off right off the bat. Okay. So here's something that I don't know that people think about. Okay. When it comes to training that way, right? To be, there's nothing wrong with training to be strong and fast and agile and all that kind of stuff, right? But what is one given for sport fighters? They know when the fight is scheduled. These things are all planned out, okay? Months, at least in advance, right? So they get months to prep for this fight. They get to work out. They get to, watch their diet. They get to, make sure they're just in peak form. Watch, videos of other fights of, the upcoming opponent and whatnot, workout strategies, all that kind of stuff, right? But what happens if they get injured before fight time? Fight gets rescheduled. Okay. Now let's contrast that with the real world. One, violence doesn't give you a calendar invite. And if it does, and you show up, well, then you deserve what you get, right? In the real world, right, violence comes when you're limping, when your back is out, when you're sick with the flu, right? Or after you've been up all night helping somebody else through some kind of emotional crisis, or your kid was ill all night long. There were nights in my earlier days where I was up all night long or all day with a sick kid or a sick wife or whatever, right? Or, relationship strain or whatever, right? And then having to go back on duty, right? As a military cop for a 12-hour shift, which usually was 14 to 16 hours because of inspections and what we call them guard mounts and briefings and debriefings and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but just little to no sleep and still having to go out there and deal with people that, who knows, could have rolled out of bed that morning thinking about what bad shit they were going to do. Okay. And that's just the reality of things, right? And to think and train like that, like that's the reality. A lot of people, a lot of students, a lot of teachers train and practice as though they've got all the time in the world before the bad guy is going to show up. I mean, just admit that it's a hobby. Call it a day. Do what you want, right? But if we're focused on real world stuff, right? My first duty station out of basic training in the military was in South Korea. I don't know how many people actually know this or not, but the Korean War never ended. Okay. I know there are dates in history books and things like that, right? But there was never a peace treaty signed. There was something, the thing that was signed is something called an armistice. An armistice is an agreement to stop shooting at each other. That's not the same as a peace treaty, right? Um, so technically, the Korean War is still so. So I get shipped over, and I get assigned to Second Infantry Division, which is right up against the demilitarized zone, the DMZ. It's this huge section, right? And Second MP Company, right? Now, luckily, I was in a detached platoon, farthest away from everybody else, almost butted up against 8th Army, which is Second Infantry Division's backup, right? But they're supposed to hold the line when stuff's happening, okay? And the best time for North Korea to attack is the dead of winter because of the layout, right? The river that separates North Korea and South Korea in the wintertime freezes solid. And when I say solid, I mean you can drive full on heavy armored tanks and you know, guns and things like that across these things, right? Rest of the time, you've got this navigation problem, right? But they can just come straight across. And to give you, for instance, for the second, now it got warmer as you go down the peninsula, right? As you go down through South Korea. By the time you hit Jeju-do or Jeju Island, which is off the southern tip, it's all tropical, right? But where I was, wintertime, we were wearing Arctic gear. Okay. Like full on Arctic stuff. Okay. Arctic mittens, right? That have a trigger finger kind of thing that you can, face masks because the face will frostbite like that, become frostbitten that fast. Okay. So worst of fucking conditions, right? If anything would have ever happened. Okay. So, we were constantly being reminded, okay, the balloon could go up, which was our catchphrase for shit going sideways, could go up at any time. You must be prepared. Your shit has to be ready and ready to go at a moment's notice. Okay. All the time. Contrast that with being back in the States, not being in Europe where something could have happened during the Cold War, or being in South Korea where it's like right there. You're holding the line, literally, right? I mean, even if, like when Grenada happened, right? They planned and got units ready and stuff before they did the initial assault. And we had, when it was time for me to go, we had 3-4 days, right? And getting ready and all that kind of stuff. We were scheduled to go to the clinic and get like our battery of tropical inoculations, our shots and stuff like that for malaria and all kinds of things, right? It wasn't like they just threw you in, right? Where I was in South Korea, right out of basic training, if that alarm went off, things were coming, right? You were either ready or not, right? And so, huge difference. Okay. Anyway, let's switch to kind of a second fighter type, right? So this is the street fighters, the tough guys, whatever, right? The bump shoulders. Next thing you know, there's pushing and shoving and gnashing of teeth and whatever. Again, we're still thinking fighter, right? So this isn't so much where they know the fight, the date of the fight or whatever, but these guys tend to walk around with a chip on their shoulder, and they're willing to fight at the drop of a hat, right, or the drop of a dime. I've been told by certain people that over the years that have wanted to train with me, that they just can't help themselves. Right? Somebody calls my mom a name, they call my sister a name, whatever they do X Y Z. Right? I can't not. Right? But see, here's something interesting. Okay, because I often ask, right? When was the last time somebody just pulled a knife on you, or they car came up, right? Slammed on the brakes and stuff, and they hit you with it, knocked you on the ground and stuff like that, and jumped out of the car, and here they were coming, right? Oh, there's an interesting scenario, right? Or had already hit you with a tire iron or a baseball bat or whatever, and you weren't down and out, but you were right, not what you were 30 seconds ago, right? But here's the thing with that group, right? They mellow out with age. They mellow out with injury, illness, right? Um, because they know they don't have it in them anymore. There's one guy I'm thinking of at the moment that had that I can't help myself kind of thing, and he's chimed in on some of our discussions online and whatnot, and he goes, I just I negotiate more now, and I don't put myself in those situations and things because I know that I'm not as fast and I'm older or I'm injured or whatever. Oh, okay, yeah, good. I'm glad it finally sunk in. But random attacks, the kind of things that we're talking about, they don't disappear just because you've quote unquote grown out of it. Right? As a matter of fact, some of the attackers that I'm thinking of will cut you from the herd because you're heavy or you're old or they overheard you talking about having arthritis and being up and down on ladders for the last week has now affected your back and whatnot, and you need to kind of reset. No, that's um, you're now in prime target category, right? So while fighting may be a phase that some people go through in their life, right? Self-defense is not a phase. Right? It's not a choice. Right? It's a necessity. I believe it's a responsibility, but we're not talking about fighting. Okay. And we contrast that to the reality of today. I don't know how many people's been watching the news. Gunmen, snipers, just freaking demonstrations going sideways and whatnot, right? Firefighters, EMTs, teachers, right? We're seeing real violence in so-called safe places. Headlines show it almost daily, right? And the reality is that violence, the type of violence we're talking about, right, is random. We never know when it's going to happen, what it's going to look like, how many aggressors, the environment, nothing like that, right? It's often senseless, right? If you've never been in one of these things, then you will not have experienced, which is something you have to get over mentally, right? Because it doesn't matter in that moment. This is part of Zanshin. Working through the brain racing to figure out not only what is happening, but why it's happening. Because to a rational human being, a lot of this violence is often senseless, right? Like you don't have a better way to work out your problems. Okay. And what we're talking about, this doesn't rarely, if ever, does this wait for you to be ready. Okay. It's not the same. Okay. Now I'm paraphrasing this across years of listening to Hanselman since I teach. But in a nutshell, what he's been teaching for years is you will be injured. That is part of real combat. You train to be able to continue after that, after you've been injured. Okay? The question is, when did you get injured? Were you injured and that's why they chose you because you were an easier target? Did you get injured before the attack actually started? Now, technically, the attack started because you got nailed, and now, like, they got you done jump on you, and now you have to work from that perspective to not get further beaten, maimed, killed, whatever. Right? And we have to we have to recognize this, because Hatsumi Sensei wasn't just teaching for the sake of teaching, right? This topic kept coming up and coming up and coming up because this perspective, or this mentality, I guess, right, is about normalizing, right, the presence of injury, and it supports the philosophy of resilience, right, over just mere avoidance. Of course, if we can avoid something, we're going to avoid it. But shikata ga nai, right? Last episode, right? It is what it is, right? Some things can't be avoided. Not because we choose to not avoid it. I'm talking about, like, we've already been clocked, right? So this little lesson, again, it's paraphrased across a bunch of different lessons, but this lesson from Hatsumi Sensei, right? This sets the mental stage for working through pain and having to adapt on the fly. Because I often talk about, and especially in that one episode I was talking about with assuming, what the hell was the title? Assuming disadvantage, right? That you have what you have. So, and no matter what, right? Any good attacker, right, positions themselves for the advantage. So you're always going to start out at a disadvantage. But what I'm talking about during this episode, right? What I'm talking about today is you become injured through the foray. And so you lose shit as you move forward. And you still have to win. You still have to survive. Okay. So these three truths, okay, should lead everybody, me, you, everybody that's serious about this subject, should lead the student to one realization: preparation isn't optional. Preparation in areas like this, disadvantage, working through, um, losing a limb, and I don't mean that it got hacked off or anything like that, but losing the use of a limb or a body part, or even not being able to move, right? Taijutsu is effective body movement. Yeah, well, you take a shot in the wrong place, you're going to be fighting from a ground holding position because you're not going to be able to move. Okay? So the preparation in these areas, not optional. It is the only path. All right?